He casually unearthed an ancient helmet. Now the aliens see him as their prophesied leader, the merciless Sunbeat. Down on Arthur Vega's back as he dug the trench deeper into the alien soil sweat. Trickled down his neck, soaking the collar of his worn combat, fatigues the protective armor plates strapped to his chest and back, salvaged from a battlefield 3 clicks east, felt like they were cooking him alive. Hell. He muttered, driving the shovel into the red-tinted dirt. With another powerful thrust, his muscular arms tensed with each movement the result of years as a mercenary soldier across 12 different planetary systems. This godforsaken planet Terra's 4, according to military charts, the graveyard to the mercs who'd fought here had been abandoned after the Galactic Coalition declared the territorial dispute between the Kalari and Siuan empires officially resolved, which meant both sides had exhausted their resources fighting over this worthless rock and agreed to leave it a demilitarized zone. Now it was just Arthur and a handful of other mercenaries hired by salvage companies to recover valuable tech before the planet's harsh climate destroyed everything worth selling. Hey, pretty boy, called Decker from his position 30 m away, you planning to dig all the way to the core? Command wants these trenches for cover, not for burial. Arthur flipped him off without looking up, just being thorough, unlike some people who his shovel struck something hard with a metallic clang that reverberated up his arms. The hell, he dropped to his knees, brushing away dirt with gloved hands. Something gleamed beneath the soil, not the dull gray of standard military hardware, but something that caught the sunlight with an almost liquid shimmer. Arthur dug his fingers around the edges of the object and pulled. It came free. With surprising ease, as if eager to be found, he turned it over in his hands. Wiping away a century of compacted soil, it was a helmet, but unlike any he'd seen before. The metal, if it was metal at all, had a strange mirror-like quality that reflected the harsh sunlight in prismatic patterns. Intricate symbols were etched across its surface, flowing like water around the contours. Holy, he whispered, running his thumb over the alien script. Decker, check this out. But Decker didn't answer. The entire dig site had fallen silent. Arthur looked up to find himself surrounded by figures in armor similar to the helmet he held, hundreds of them appearing seemingly from nowhere. Standing motionless on the ridges surrounding the excavation site, their armor gleamed with the same strange silvery quality. They were humanoid, but definitely not human. Their proportions were slightly off, limbs too long, torsos too narrow, and their skin visible at the neck and wrists where armor didn't cover was a pale blue. What the actual? Arthur slowly rose to his feet, helmet still clutched in his hands, as one the armored figures dropped to their knees. Heads bowed in his direction, a slender figure pushed through their ranks. Unlike the warriors, she wore a form-fitting black suit with silver accents that emphasized her graceful curves. Her skin was the color of a clear earth sky, her hair a cascade of silver that caught the light like flowing mercury. Her eyes, when she raised them to meet his, were a deep, mesmerizing blue. She approached without fear, stopping just a few feet away. Her gaze moved from the helmet in his hands to his face, her expression one of reverence and awe. The prophecy of the eternal flame speaks truth, she said, her voice melodic despite the translator implant in Arthur's ear, converting her words to standard. You are Keller, reborn, the warrior of light who will lead us to victory in the final battle. Arthur blinked. I'm what now? She gestured to the helmet. You have unearthed the crown of ascension. Only the true Keller could find it, for it has remained hidden for 10,000 cycles, waiting for your return. Look, miss, I am Lixa, first daughter of House Terrace, appointed guardian of the sacred texts. She dropped to one knee before him. And you are our prophesied leader. Arthur looked from the helmet to the kneeling alien warriors surrounding them, then back to the beautiful blue-skinned woman before him. His mercenary instinct screamed this was trouble, big trouble. But another part of him, the part that had been drifting from one battlefield to another since leaving Earth years ago, felt something else entirely: curiosity, and maybe, just maybe, opportunity. I think there's been a misunderstanding, he said carefully. I'm just a human, a mercenary. I was digging a trench and found this by accident. Lick's lips curved into a knowing smile. There are no accidents in the great tapestry of fate, Kellner. The helmet called to you across the stars. Before Arthur could respond, the ground shook with the unmistakable rumble of approaching ships. He looked up to see 3 massive vessels descending through the atmosphere, their hulls bearing the same silvery sheen as the armor of the warriors. The High Council approaches, Laxa said, rising to her feet. They come to pledge their loyalty to you and to prepare for the coming war. Arthur stared At the helmet in his hands, its surface now pulsing with a faint inner light that matched the rhythm of his heartbeat. Well, he muttered, this day just got a whole lot more complicated. Arthur stood in what he'd been told was the chamber of ascension aboard the largest of the three vessels, a ship called the Eternal Flame. The room was vast, its ceiling arching high overhead walls adorned with intricate murals depicting epic battles and cosmic events. The same strange symbols from the helmet appeared throughout, glowing with a soft blue luminescence. This is insane, Hera, he muttered, turning the helmet over in his hands. Despite his skepticism, he couldn't deny the craftsmanship was unlike anything he'd seen in his travels across the galaxy. You doubt your destiny, Lixa said, entering the chamber with silent grace. She changed from her form-fitting black suit into ceremonial attire, flowing silver robes that somehow managed to accentuate her lithe figure even more than before. Arthur cleared his throat. Look, I appreciate the royal treatment, but there's been a mistake. I'm not this Keller person. I'm just Arthur Vega, ex-Earth Defense Force, a current gun for hire. Yet you found the crown of ascension where it lay hidden for 10 millennium. She moved closer, her scent reminiscent of something like jasmine, but with an alien undertone that made his pulse quicken. Our texts speak of a warrior from beyond the stars who would appear when the Voidborn threat returns. Voidborn, ancient enemies of my people, the Tias vow they consume worlds. Arthur Vega, and according to our seers, they approach once more. She reached out her slender blue fingers, tracing the edge of the helmet. Only Keller can lead us to victory. Their fingers brushed, sending an unexpected jolt through Arthur's body. He attributed it to static electricity, though the ship's environmental control seemed far too sophisticated for such mundane phenomena. Even if I wanted to help, which I'm not saying I do, I know. Together they eliminated the Voidborn scouts, though not before one of the mercenaries took a glancing blow that left his arm blackened and withered. As the last enemy fell, Arthur knelt beside the injured man. Can you help him? He asked Elixa. She examined the wound, her expression grim. The corruption spreads quickly. We must get him to the medical bay aboard the Eternal Flame. They retreated to the interceptor. The injured merc supported between Decker and Arthur as they lifted off. The Obsidian scout ships began to retreat as well. They're reporting back, Lixa said, her voice tight. This was only the beginning. Arthur watched the dark vessels disappear into the upper atmosphere. How much time do we have? Days. Perhaps no more. She turned to him, her deep blue eyes intense. Now do you understand why we need Kel-Nar in the close confines of the interceptor? With adrenaline still coursing through his veins, Arthur became acutely aware of Lee's proximity, the way her armor accentuated every curve, the slight flush that darkened her blue skin to indigo, the scent of her like ozone and exotic flowers. I understand you need help, he said finally, and I'm not in the habit of walking away from a fight, especially when innocent lives are at stake. Something passed between them, then a current of understanding that transcended their different species. Leah's hand found his on the control panel, her cool fingers intertwining with his warm ones. Then you will try, she asked her voice barely above a whisper. Arthur glanced back at his injured comrade, at Decker's questioning expression, then returned his gaze to Leah's hopeful face. I'll try, he agreed, but I'm doing this my way, not because of some prophecy. Her smile was radiant. That is all I ask for. Now the interceptor soared upward, leaving the battlefield behind, but Arthur with certainty that the war was just beginning, both against the Voidborn and against his own reluctance to embrace the destiny that had quite literally fallen into his hands. You want to put what in my head? Arthur stared at the small luminescent crystal Elixa held between her slender blue fingers. A memory shard, she explained. It contains the essence of the bonding ritual. Without it, connecting to the crown would overwhelm your consciousness. They stood in a circular chamber deep within the Eternal Flame. The walls pulsed with the same silvery light as the helmet. The crown of ascension, which rested on a pedestal at the center of the room. 3 days had passed since the skirmish with the Voidborn scouts. 3 days of preparation, planning, and increasingly heated debates in the War Council. Arthur's fellow mercenaries had been integrated into the Terra's full forces, though not without friction. Remind me again why we can't just shoot these Voidborn bastards with bigger guns, Arthur asked, eyeing the crystal warily. The Voidborn are merely vessels, Lixa said patiently. Their true form exists partially in another dimension. The crown allows its wearer to perceive and affect that dimension. Right, interdimensional warfare, because regular warfare wasn't complicated enough. Despite his sarcasm, Arthur had begun to accept the gravity of the situation. The injured mercenary Powell had barely survived, his arm withered beyond saving the Tussle healers. Had done what they could, but the voidborn corruption had nearly claimed his life. The ritual is intimate, Lix. Continued, her voice dropping slightly. I will guide you through it as your anchor. Without me, you could lose yourself in the memories of past wearers. Arthur raised an eyebrow. Intimate, how exactly? A deeper indigo flush is spread across Lee's cheeks. Our minds will temporarily merge. It is not unlike what humans might call a spiritual union, so you'll be in my head reading my thoughts and I in yours. John R.H. She confirmed it requires absolute trust. Arthur considered this. Over the past days, he'd come to respect Lixa, her intelligence, her combat skills, her unwavering dedication to her people, and there was something else, something that made his pulse quicken whenever she entered a room. Will it hurt? He asked finally. It can be intense, but not painful. No, her eyes met his. Are you afraid, Arthur Vega? He laughed, terrified, but not of the pain. Her expression softened. Of what then? Of what you might see in there. He tapped his temple. Not all of my memories are pleasant, nor are mine. She stepped closer. War leaves scars on all who fight it. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken tension. Arthur was acutely aware of her proximity, of the subtle scent that always surrounded her. Fine, he decided. Let's do this, H, but if you start poking around embarrassing childhood memories, I'm out. Her laugh was musical. I promise to respect your privacy. Mostly. The War Council convened an hour later. Arthur, with the memory shard now integrated at the base of his skull, a process that had been far less painful than he'd anticipated, stood before the assembled terrorist vile commanders and his own mercenary team. The Voidborn fleet will reach us within 48 hours, he announced, projecting the tactical display. Lixa had helped him prepare. Their advanced scouts have already reported our position and strength. Then we should evacuate, suggested Elder Kell, one of the more conservative council members. Our fleet can outrun them. Running just delays the inevitable, Arthur countered. They're tracking the Crown's energy signature. They'll follow us wherever we go. Then we fight, declared Commander Thays, the Turval military leader, as we have always done. Not as you've always done, Arthur said firmly. Your traditional battle formations are predictable. The Voidborn have fought you for thousands of years. They know your tactics. A murmur of discontent rippled through the Tussle side of the chamber. And what would you suggest? Human Theas asked, his tone bordering on insubordination. Asymmetrical warfare. Arthur gestured to Decker, who stepped forward. My team specializes in guerrilla tactics, small mobile strike teams instead of mass formations, hit and run instead of direct confrontation, cowards tactics. Someone muttered. Effective tactics, Decker shot back. We've taken down forces 10 times our size with these methods. The prophecy speaks of Keller leading us to glorious battle. Thays insisted, not skulking in shadows. The prophecy can kiss my ass, Arthur said bluntly. I interested in winning, not glory. The chamber fell silent. Lixa, standing beside High Elder Ren, suppressed a smile. Perhaps, Ren said carefully, there is wisdom in the human approach. Commander Thays, you will incorporate these guerrilla tactics into our battle. PL. So Theas looked like he'd swallowed something sour, but he nodded stiffly. The bonding ritual will take place tonight, Ren continued. By tomorrow, Keller will have full access to the Crown's power. As the council dispersed, Decker approached Arthur. You sure about this, Vega? These blue folks are putting a lot of faith in some ancient hat. Not much choice at this point. Lixa entered wearing ceremonial robes of shimmering silver that left her shoulders bare. Her hair was unbound, cascading like liquid moonlight down her back. Are you prepared? She asked softly. As I'll ever be. Arthur had changed into the garments she'd provided, loose-fitting pants of a silky material and nothing else. He felt odd, vulnerable. The ritual requires physical contact, she explained, approaching him. The memory shard will facilitate our mental connection, but our bodies must also be aligned. Arthur raised an eyebrow. That indigo flush returned to her cheeks. In my culture, the mind and body are not separate entities. One affects the other. She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Her hands rose to rest lightly on his bare chest. Your heart beats faster than our were, she observed. Is it fear or something else? Arthur swallowed hard. Definitely something else. Her lips curved in a smile that sent heat coursing through him. Good fear would make the connection difficult. Her fingers trace patterns on his skin. The ritual often creates intense sensations. It is natural. And after the ritual, he asked, his voice rougher than he intended. Her eyes met his, pupils dilated. After is for us to decide. She guided him to kneel before the pedestal, where the crown rested. Kneeling opposite him, she took his hands. In hers, their knees touching. Close your eyes, she whispered. Feel the connection forming between us, between you and the crown. As Arthur closed his eyes, the memory at the base of his skull began to warm. He felt Leah's consciousness brush against his, tentative at first, then more boldly, and then he wasn't just himself anymore. He was also her and others, echoes of past, whereas their experiences. Nothing about your people, your enemies, or how to lead an alien army. He set the helmet down on a pedestal of the same silvery material. I'm a soldier, not a general. Leah's lips curved into a smile that was both knowing and alluring. The knowledge will come. The crown connects to its wearer, imparting the wisdom of all who wore it before. That sounds invasive, she laughed. The sound like crystal chimes. Your human caution is refreshing. Most Tessel would leap at such power. Yeah, well, where I come from, mysterious artifacts that mess with your head are usually bad news. Arthur stepped away from the helmet, trying to clear his thoughts. The entire situation felt surreal, like he'd stumbled into someone else's destiny, yet something about the helmet called to him, a faint resonance he couldn't explain. Your companions have been accommodated in the Eastern Quarter, Lixa said, changing the subject, though they seem confused by our reverence toward you. Arthur snorted. That makes two of us. The High Council awaits your audience. They've traveled far to meet the reborn Kelnar, and if I refuse to play along. Lick's expression grew serious. The prophet why does not speak of refusal. There's always a first time. He crossed his arms, his mercenary instincts kicking in. What happens if I just walk away? She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her blue skin. Why would you? Your kind humans, you seek purpose, do you not? You travel between stars fighting others wars for mere credits. Is that truly fulfilling? The question hit closer to home than Arthur cared to admit. His life since leaving Earth had been a series of battlefields and temporary alliances, never staying in one place long enough to form connections. You don't know anything about me, he said, though the conviction in his voice wavered. I know more than you think. Arthur Vega, her hand reached up, fingers lightly touching his cheek. The contact sent another surge through him, more intense than before. The crown chose you not randomly. It sensed something in you that resonates with our spirit. Despite himself, Arthur leaned slightly into her touch. Her skin was cooler than human temperature, but not unpleasantly so. The closeness between them suddenly seemed charged with something beyond their discussion of prophecies and ancient enemies. And what if I'm not what you and your people need? He asked, his voice lower. Now then, we discover that together. Her eyes, those impossibly deep blue orbs, held his gaze. But first, you must at least try. The air between them grew heavy with unspoken tension. Arthur became acutely aware of how close they stood, of the subtle curves beneath her ceremonial robes, of the exotic beauty of her alien features that somehow managed to be both foreign and enticing. Your people have strange customs, he said, trying to regain his mental footing. Where I come from, we don't usually appoint leaders based on who finds lost property. Lick's laugh returned, breaking the tension momentarily. And where I come from, warriors don't usually question when destiny calls. Her hand dropped from his face, but she didn't step back. Perhaps we have much to learn from each other. The double meaning in her words wasn't lost on Arthur. Despite the absurdity of his situation, he found himself intrigued not just by the mystery of the helmet and the prophecy, but by the enigmatic woman before him. I'll meet your council, he conceded finally, but I'm not making any promise about leading armies or fulfilling prophecies. Lick's smile widened. A beginning is all I ask. She turned toward the chamber entrance, then glanced back over her shoulder for now as she led him from the chamber. Arthur couldn't help but notice the graceful sway of her hips beneath the flowing robes. Whatever cosmic joke had landed him in this situation, at least the company was proving interesting. The High Council chamber hummed with tension as Arthur entered. 7 Tefal elders sat in a semicircle, their blue skin weathered to a deeper azure with age, their silver hair elaborately braided with metallic ornaments that clinked softly when they moved. The human who found the crown announced, the central figure, his voice resonant despite his apparent age. I am High Elder Ren. We have awaited this moment for generations. Arthur stood tall, military training kicking in despite his discomfort. With respect, Elder, I'm still not convinced I'm your prophesied leader. A murmur rippled through the council. Lixa, standing beside him, tensed slightly. The crown chooses, said a female elder to Ren's right. It has never been wrong. Perhaps a demonstration would ease your doubts. Ren suggested. The crown contains not just knowledge, but power. Would you consent to a trial? Before Arthur could respond, alarms blared throughout the chamber. A young warrior burst through The doors his armor scratched and smoking Voidborn scout he gasped they've breached the lower atmosphere. The council erupted in controlled chaos. Ren turned to Arthur, his expression grave. It seems your trial comes sooner than expected, Keller. I'm not. Arthur began then. Sighed. Fine, what are we dealing with? Lixa touched a panel on her wrist, projecting a holographic display. 3 scout vessels, small but deadly, they heading for the excavation site. My team is still down there, Arthur realized with a jolt of concern. Then we must move quickly, Lika said, already heading for the door. The armory is this way. 20 minutes later, Arthur found himself in a T-Fall interceptor, streaking toward the planet's surface. The ship was unlike any human craft he piloted, more intuitive, responding almost to his thoughts rather than manual controls. Lixa sat beside him, her ceremonial robes exchanged for battle armor that hugged her form like a second skin. The scouts are likely searching for the crown's energy signature, she explained. They've hunted it for millennia, so I dug up the cosmic equivalent of a homing beacon. Arthur grimaced. Great, the crown was hidden for a reason, she replied. Its power is unmatched. In the wrong hands it could destroy worlds. Yeah, I've heard the story before. He banked the interceptor sharply as they entered the atmosphere. So what the plan? I'm not wearing that thing until I know exactly what it does. Lick's lips quirked in a half smile. First we save your friends, then perhaps you'll be more inclined to embrace your role. The excavation site came into view, and Arthur's blood ran cold. 3 obsidian ships hovered above the trenches, pulsing with sickly green energy. Dark figures moved below, hunting through the dig site. Those are Voidborn, he asked. Their physical forms? Yes, mere vessels for something far worse. Lick's expression hardened. They consume life energy, leaving only husks behind. Arthur spotted movement in one of the trenches. Decker and 2 other mercs pinned down and returning fire with standard issue pulse rifles that seemed to barely affect the shadowy hunters. I need to get down there, he said, already plotting a landing trajectory. Will be exposed, Lixa warned. Then cover me, he flashed her a grin that bellied his fear. Isn't that what you'd expect from your prophesied leader? For a moment Lixa stared at him, then her face broke into a smile that sent warmth cascading through his chest. Perhaps you are Keller. After all, the landing was rough but effective, the interceptor touching down just long enough for them to deploy. Arthur hit the ground running, his mercenary instincts taking over as he sprinted toward his trapped comrades. Lixa moved like liquid lightning beside him, a weapon that resembled a spear but crackled with energy in her hand. When the first Voidborn turned toward them, she struck with precision, the spear piercing its shadowy form. The creature dissolved with an unearthly shriek. Arthur reached Decker's position, sliding into the trench beside his fellow mercenaries, making friends as usual. I see Vega, what the hell is happening? Decker's eyes were wild. 1 minute we're digging, the next these things are hunting us like animals. Long story a short version, I found an alien AR artifact. Now the bad guys want it. Arthur checked his borrow turbo weapon. This will work better than your pulse rifles. Aim for the center mass. As if to demonstrate, Lixa vaulted into the trench beside them, her movements graceful despite the combat. She dispatched another Voidborn with a fluid thrust of her spear. Who's the blue girl? Decker asked, momentarily distracted by Leah's prowess. Also a long story, Arthur replied. Rising to fire at an approaching shadow, the weapon discharged a burst of silver energy that tore through the creature. Follow our lead and stay close. The battle was brief but intense, working